Hello, everybody. Good evening, wherever you are. It might still be afternoon for some of our West Coast folks. So super excited to be in community with y'all tonight. As Ryan said, my name is Clarence. I'm one of the co-founders of the Notice Coalition. Really quickly about the Notice Coalition, we are a national network of advocates, researchers, and organizers building a movement to end youth surveillance in schools and defend youth justice in the digital age. We empower Black, Brown, Indigenous, disabled, LGBTQIA+, and other historically marginalized young people to build liberated futures. Since 2021, our coalition has sounded the alarm on the impact of police surveillance, digital pushout, and data criminalization on the rights and freedoms of youth and young adults in public education and beyond. And one of the ways that we are doing that is with our Ending Youth Surveillance series. So this is a fourth installment. We will have some more installments in the new year, but this will be closing us out for 2024. But we are super excited for our speaker tonight. And so without any further ado, I will turn it over back to Ryan.
Thanks, Clarence. I'm Ryan. I use he and they pronouns. I'm the fellowship coordinator for our No Data About Us, Without Us fellowship that is taking place in Houston and the Midwest. I am excited to introduce our speaker today, who is also from Houston, Cameron Samuels. Cameron has organized nationally, is recognized for efforts against book banning and LGBTQ internet censorship and access in Katy Independent School District. Within a few months of facing the school board alone and receiving no applause while other speakers were stroked with fear from the bigotry, Samuels packed school board meetings and distributed hundreds of banned books to students across Texas. Samuel is now organizing with a coalition of students called Students Engaged in Advancing Texas to demonstrate youth visibility and policymaking. And without further ado, I'll pass it to Cameron to talk about our talk tonight. And thank you all for attending. And thank you, Cameron, for sharing your knowledge and brilliance that's based here in Houston, which feels really special to me. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me and for inviting me to this space. It's been great with SEAT to see that students like Christiana are involved in ending youth surveillance here. And with my lived experiences in Katy, I hope that my insights are great to share with y'all and that you can take back home something from that in your communities and in the work that you do professionally, but also personally. So I, as a student in Katy ISD, was a freshman when I first saw that my school internet filter was prohibiting students from accessing the Trevor Project Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And I, as a student who was trying to come to terms with my LGBTQ identity, not having had words for it for years, but really finding that, oh, maybe there's some way I can find community or really put a name to this or understand this better. But my school district was sending us a clear message that they didn't care about us, that our LGBTQ identity was alternative, inherently sexual, and also a lifestyle choice. The internet filter had a category called alternative sexual lifestyles, and in parentheses, GLBT. And I was a freshman seeing this in high school. I I was just blown away by how the school district didn't care about us, that this was overtly discriminatory. I knew that to heart. The internet filter was not foreign to me or any student at the school. We've encountered block pages saying that these websites are blocked for years. Even in elementary school, and maybe even as early as kindergarten, seeing the internet filter block websites for random reasons, just random websites we'll stumble upon from Google searches, whatever it may be, we were familiar with this internet filter. We we knew that this was kind of an impediment to our education because sometimes when we tried to access an educational YouTube video or accessing a website for class projects or for learning or whatever that is, we couldn't access them. Even our teachers would often run into pages that were blocked by the school internet filter when this was part of our class curriculum. The internet filter is just a bunch of jumbled data and numbers and databases, and it's not really something that is firm truth or something that just works in a universal way. It's very arbitrary. It's just whatever websites are categorized in certain ways, and as the internet's always changing, I mean, keeping this up to date is nearly impossible. And so websites often would be blocked from the get-go if they're not allowed by the internet filter, if they're not explicitly allowed. And so I knew that in this moment in my freshman year that this internet filter was overtly discriminatory, that this wasn't just some random website being blocked because it's entertainment or because of different reasons. This was something that was literally blocked because it was LGBTQ content. And I wanted to do something about that. Everyone could have an opinion, but not many, especially my peers that I saw, actually had means to do something about that. But we tried. We brought together students, or I tried to bring together friends or classmates that thought this was also a problem, but it didn't really amount to anything. We thought, oh, maybe a petition could work, maybe raising awareness on social media could work, but I mean, kind of doing those things didn't really amount to anything. And COVID, of course, happened. That was a huge roadblock my sophomore year of high school. But it was kind of in those times where nothing really changed with the internet filter. But returning back to school my senior year of high school, I saw that this internet filter was still in place. It was still blocking these websites. And at that point, I had gotten a bit more involved in advocacy for youth engagement and civics, and just seeing that our voice is powerful, that we can do something, getting to know the systems of government, not just Congress or the presidency, but state legislature and school districts. I was seeing firsthand that there was a deeper meaning to who represents us and how we can engage and create a bigger impact. And that's where I decided to speak up to my school board. I had sort of developed some plans of how we can approach this, the sorts of things that we wanted. We wanted non-discrimination because that wasn't in the non-discrimination policy. It Our district did not protect students on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity, and students wanted that. We wanted these websites unblocked, this internet filter dismantled, at least with this category, as this wasn't something that was required by federal law or any sort of law. This was something that the school district and its third-party internet filter was enforcing on its own choice. So it was around the same time that books were being pulled off of shelves because censorship is massive, and there's many different ways that they have tried to erase and legislate identity out of the classroom, out of schools, out of life. So when they canceled an author visit for a Black author because certain people in the community thought he was teaching critical race theory in his books and that this was something that couldn't be in the classrooms, the common culture war that we've seen play out over several years, especially in school districts in the most recent years. And that was when I thought, okay, I need to stand up against this and mention this internet filter too, because this was something that is affecting every student. We we've been very familiar throughout our time in school, but no one's really said anything about it. And I'm sure many people saw the LGBTQ internet filter, but just like me, was not didn't find any way to make light of that, to say anything about that. What are you gonna do? Talk to your phone when you access that block page? Who do you go to about that? And so that's when I kind of brought together peers again, and we went to the school board meeting. Yet it was just me. No one else wanted to speak publicly, and many of them didn't have supportive family. And so how were they going to go address the highest people in power in our school district in such a public setting, which was 30 minutes from my home, from our school? So wasn't even accessible, and on a Monday night where we could be doing homework, or we could be just getting a break from school or extracurricular activities or college apps or whatever that is. So it ended up just being me. And to have the whole room of speakers called up spewing bigotry and hate about books. And to me, being called up, the only student in the room, the only person that's defended intellectual freedom and defended access to these resources, just silence after I spoke, and people giving me demeaning stares when I walked back to my seat. And there's one thing, I feel those were stairs to climb on. The stairs that they gave me were stairs to climb on because we built a movement from that moment. The students that I had been in touch with and hundreds of others who saw this started getting involved, started sharing clips on their social media, organizations reaching out, elevating our voice in the press, receiving books to donate, and filing legal action with the ACLU to dismantle this internet filter. This ended up spanning months my senior year. So from fall semester to when I graduated, we we stuck tired and true and building more momentum as time went by. And the when the school district returned our complaint, we didn't win in that moment. We got some websites gradually unblocked over time, but they weren't budging with dismantling this internet filter. But we appealed on the day of my graduation because they sent it back on the day of my graduation, the resolution, not following their own policies or deadlines or whatever it was. So this was delayed. And so they didn't want me to appeal. They wanted this to be done with. But we acted quickly, we appealed, and it continued. And so it was as I was moving into college, receiving an email saying that this internet filter was dismantled, that they listened to us, that they really made a decision to unblock this internet filter in high schools and middle schools and to unblock certain resources like the Trevor Project throughout the district. And so just this incredible moment that our student-led advocacy really made a difference. The voices that were elevated and amplified at school board meetings, in the press, through organizations, through the legal system, through all the different aspects of building a social movement. We did something. And it's just so incredible to see that the student voice, as always, we hold expertise in our own experiences. No one can tell us otherwise. And if we aren't at the table, if we aren't at these board meetings or testifying to lawmakers at the state capitol, then who else is going to tell our story as youth? It'd be left up to all those people who are spewing bigotry and hate and misinformation. It'd be left up to those people. And it would be justification that the community doesn't support its LGBTQ or BIPOC people, that we don't deserve access, uncensored access to a truthful and comprehensive curriculum. So we proved them otherwise. And since then, we've remained strong. That's when we co-founded a statewide nonprofit, seeing that these issues were happening statewide and nationwide for that matter. There were lessons to be learned from one district to another, and we could continue building momentum as we already had. Where were we going to go from there? And so that's when we found something that would be sustainable for us. So that's the story, the genesis of Seats formation and our commitment now 2 years strong from founding that in November 2022 after my graduation. 2 years strong, we've been demanding a seat at the table. So right now we are up against continued censorship bills that are already being filed in the pre-session of the Texas legislature. That's going to start in just about a month and a half, and it's going to go through the first week of June. We are expecting a lot more bills on the state level to ban cell phone use or social media use for minors or in school, to crack down on what content is allowed to be on these platforms, just like House Bill 18, which we are currently litigating, suing the state of Texas. House Bill 18, which is a large bill with many different provisions, but related to youth surveillance and censorship on digital service platforms. So this legislation that's flawed right now, these laws that are currently in place that are not serving students, that are denying us access to what we deserve, to the life-saving resources that we may desperately need, they're only going to become stronger in the legislature, or at least that's what they hope. And so we're going to be continuing to show up where lawmakers are gaining more authority over what books remain in classrooms, over what websites are allowed to access, and what content on those platforms. And there is some light, a glimmer of hope in this, though, because I had developed House Bill 1945 in the previous Texas legislative session, which protects student access to resources for mental health and suicide prevention, human trafficking, domestic violence, a couple other different things of what would be commonly blocked on school internet. And so this state legislation, if passed, as we're reintroducing it in this coming session, if passed, would allow students uncensored access to the very resources like the Trevor Project, Suicide Prevention Lifeline, that have been blocked in my district and many across Texas. And so that's what we're looking ahead to, knowing it's going to be a big fight, knowing that there's going to be a lot of contention regarding public education, regarding what is appropriate for society, these cultural norms, whether we're going to progress as a nation and as a state of Texas, or whether we're going to become more authoritative and more surveilling of our youth. And I hope that that's something that's meaningful to y'all and something you can take back into what you do. And happy to answer any questions. Thank y'all so much.
No, thank you, Cameron. That was so amazing and inspiring and uplifting. I think especially at a time where so many of us are like grappling with where we are in the world, in this country, where we're headed, to hear stories of resistance, overcoming creativity, endurance, like it's really inspiring, and really appreciate the amazing work and leadership that you've shown. Um, do folks have we have a few moments for we have more than a few moments for question and answers. So do folks have questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can also come off mute.
Just wanted to give a shout out to Cameron. I met him whenever I went to Austin.
Yeah, so great seeing you here.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I went. Yeah. So I think that it's inspiring to see that you made a move, like made a movement, and uh, when everybody else is like literally staring at you bad. I mean, I've been in situations like me being gone for a long time. Coming back, it's like they or looking at me in a basically the same way. Like, oh, you're a felon. You're never gonna get a second chance. You're gonna go back to prison. So I kind of like feel for what you're like coming from and how you made a move. So I congratulate you for that.
Appreciate it. Just when people in power and in authority are treating certain people certain ways, then how else can we be the best of ourselves? How can we demonstrate who we really are when we're just being labeled as certain things? And being put into certain boxes, and no one deserves that. So really appreciate that, and same to you.
Mhm. We'll see each other again.
Absolutely.
I see that we have a question from Sarah. You gonna come off mute?
Yeah. Hey, it's Sara. Thank you so much, Cameron. Can y'all hear me okay? I'm driving.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you so much for sharing all of that. That was actually really amazing. And I was really, really curious about, to be honest with you, the hacking part, like if that was something that was shared as a skill with other students or teachers. And you don't have to get into the specifics of your own experience here, but I'm curious if there was a hunger for that you sensed from
Interesting.
other students or from other teachers as a way to sort of support and subvert what was going on.
Yeah. It's like circumventing the internet filters in our school is where you're getting at. So the idea that this internet filter is in place, we we of course as students had familiar knowledge with ways to circumvent the internet filter. Of course, disabling Wi-Fi, just using cell data if a student had cell data would be one solution. And virtual private networks as another solution commonly used by students. So I knew that was happening around, and people were able to access websites. And so it it's not always a way that someone is certain to access websites, because not every student would have a personal device. They would be using a device at the school instead. And now actually in my district, there is a one-to-one Chromebook policy where personal devices are not allowed, whether that is a phone or a laptop. And every student has an assigned Chromebook that is filtered and surveilled, even to the point, I believe, of possibly GPS, even. At least I know that's the case in other school districts in Texas who have similar setups for devices. And so that means school districts could see where they are at home outside of school hours, even. They can see what websites they're accessing, and many platforms would alert administrators for particular searches. And at a time where our district has a policy that forces educators to out transgender students to their families, even in
Mm.
situations where their families are not supportive, they feel that it's a right for parents to know. And that could place students in grave harm and risk. This is awful, but that is the realities. And so that is something that these internet filters and surveillance is causing harm for students when they do not have the ability to use personal devices. So, in reality, or in theory, rather, in our district, there is no way to circumvent the internet filter because students would be using those platforms directly provided by the school. But if someone does have a phone on them, using it somewhere else, maybe going to the bathroom and trying to access the Trevor Project, then on the campus internet, before it would be blocked. Now, fortunately, it's accessible. But to possibly alert students as families by accessing those websites on a Chromebook, that, even if it's accessible, still places a harm on students. And so circumventing this internet filter, if that is disabling Wi-Fi or using a VPN, if in theory this is not pervasive, if this is not widespread usage of the district Chromebooks, if they are able to use a personal device with a VPN or disconnecting from Wi-Fi, then that's a question of who really has that opportunity when people do not have devices of their own or cell data of their own, or if their internet history is being surveilled by parents through certain apps. So it would have been life or death for many students when school is their only safe space to be LGBTQ, that the school district should be supporting them. They should be supporting us as queer students. But instead, we're seeing these policies not. So circumvention is just, in theory, always something that's available as restrictive gun laws or restrictive abortion laws. I mean, it goes both ways. We make policy that we either like or we don't like, and there's still flaws in the implementation, that it's not the end all be all solution, whether for good or for worse. But it still does a lot.
Other questions, comments, reactions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes, hi, my name is Mecca. I've also have done like activism work and like heavy policy work at a very young age. And I just wanted to ask about um how you've been coping with that, like um as an adult now, looking back, I feel like when you're in the thick of it, you kind of don't really think about how it's impacting you being a child, having to fight for basic human rights. And so I've been kind of on this kind of journey of unpacking like what that really has done to me and my body and things like that. So I'm just curious to know like if you've thought about that, if you've talked about it amongst your peers and things like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the work that you do. And I feel like as a 17-year-old in school, when this all began, it should not have been my responsibility to stand up alone or even with peers, to fight this. I could have been doing so many other things, and growing up, I feel I was thrown into this unexpectedly, but also sort of by choice. I mean, it was my choice to do something about it. Not many students have had that opportunity or had that choice. Not many students would be able to advocate for themselves, much less for others. And so I felt like it was my responsibility to do that, to advocate for those who couldn't speak up. I mean, working closely with my friends who were closeted at school and at home and not having supportive family, I was speaking with them, or they were speaking through me. They were the ones who wrote the petition that we publicized, in conjunction with our public efforts at school board meetings. So I was speaking at the board meeting, referencing the petition that a friend of mine wrote, that we got thousands of signatures on. So it, I was speaking for that friend, but also just knowing that if I wasn't showing up, or if these other people weren't showing up, then who was going to for us? Who is going to speak for the students? Who are going to speak for the marginalized? And so that is what led me to do that. And it has been a wild whirlwind in these past 3 years since that moment. And I'm still just 20 years old, still growing up and having many milestones, yet to cross in my life. And I feel community is the most important part. When I was doing that alone, it of course is isolating. But to use those stairs as stairs to climb on, I really found strength in community and found that I was doing something right, that this is what matters to me and what matters to the community, and that I wouldn't have traded that for the world, knowing that we were building community in that. It's policy transformation is one thing, but cultural shifts is another. We've built a community that now has had a Katie Pride 2 years in the running. We've never had Katie Pride before. And so we are about to have one next year for the third time. And so that is just really incredible to see what we've inspired since. And to know that 2,000 people showed up to the first Katie Pride. I don't know the numbers for the second, but that's just remarkable. I think it maybe doubled the second time. I don't know, but it just, that is a lot of people. And it goes to show that we aren't alone, that we have each other, that with things like the incoming federal administration, or with just the constant losses that we face in Texas, that we can look back and see that we've been here before, but also we have each other, and so we have not lost. And in the process, we've made significant wins along the way. We've gotten this internet filter unblocked. We've gotten books back on shelves. We've distributed hundreds of banned books to students so they have them directly in their hands. We've elevated student voice, where we've packed school board meetings. Like all of this is significant along the way. And just we're doing it together. And that's what's so important, that we have each other. And so if I didn't have supportive parents, if I didn't have supportive friends and surrounded myself in that community, that sort of self-selected community of people who wouldn't tell me no, but who would affirm. I mean, that's so important. We don't have to force ourselves to continue being in those communities that don't support us. Finding the right people and finding those right support systems has been the most important part of feeling whole and being able to do this.
Yeah, I have like 1,000 questions I want to ask, but I see that Ed had dropped a question in the chat asking you, has SEAT started to organize against other tech that is used to surveil, used for surveillance, like student activity monitoring programs, in addition to the work that y'all been doing around content filtering?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, our lawsuit against House Bill 18 in Texas, which would be Students Engaged in Advancing Texas et al. V. Ken Paxton, our Attorney General. So that is one example. And other than that, I feel it's more of the idea of censorship and student civil rights, free speech and free expression, and the intersections with a plethora of different issues, and also equitable tech. I mean, equitable access to tech is one thing. If students don't have Chromebooks or laptops or ways to access the internet at school, making sure they have that. But to implement something that's uniform across the board doesn't really help a lot. It only burdens the schools that you're already underfunded. And so there's many different issues and complications with that have streamlined their ability to surveil students at the same time. And so that has been quite just difficult to come to terms with and see that this is the reality for many students in Texas. I mean, it's only been 2.5 years since I graduated high school, and it's been incredibly more authoritarian and just dystopian, I feel. Like I couldn't fathom being a student today in high school in Texas. I couldn't fathom that. And I thought I had a really awful experience in finding affirmation in that. And I also just thought this was another thing is school bathroom passes. So in KDISD and other districts that we've seen have had new policies related to bathroom use and are using digital tech to track students leaving the classroom for the bathroom and which bathroom they're going to and when they come back and seeing how frequent that is, what the duration is. This might be to possibly subvert like drug use or vaping in schools, but can also impose. I mean, it doesn't really do anything to solve those issues in the first place if it's just surveilling. You don't know what's going to happen in those even if it's 3 minutes compared to 10 minutes in a bathroom. What is that supposed to mean? And so this is something that has burdened educators even, where this is something that has to be completed digitally, logging in through the whole system and into that like like there's multiple steps to try to access this and then to have to spend all that time when you could just really step out of the classroom, go to the restroom and come back. And coupled with this anti-transgender policy, that's also meaning that students have to go to a bathroom that matches what's on their birth certificate, despite seemingly being cisgender, like being not being apparent. Like that's not something that like could would have even been brought up for many students. And even if it was, it's so important that students have safe environments at school, and that means going to the bathroom that affirms their gender identity and their appearance and their expression. And as one student said in testimony at that board meeting about the policy was, if they're worried about creepy boys going into girls' bathrooms, then I think the problem's the creepy boys, not the trans students. And that was just beautifully said by a student, Cadence Carter, who has advocated really publicly with SEAT. So that just surveilling bathroom use and limiting student access to the bathroom if it's a certain number of times per semester. I mean, I had faced similar policies that were just by like we get a sheet of paper and cut it out and that's a bathroom pass, and so we have a certain number for the year. So yeah, I guess that makes sense. Just teachers did different things, but now there's something that's uniform, digitized, tracked. Where is that data being stored? What is that data being used for? And all these big questions, and what are the impacts of all of this, and why is it even necessary in the first place? And the ableism, indeed. Yes.
Yeah. Other questions, comments, thoughts, reactions? As folks are forming their questions, um, I had a question. I'm trying to figure out which one I want to ask. Um, so one of the things that really stands out to me about your advocacy is one, the courage that you had to be able to kind of stand alone in that moment at the school board and kind of deal with the unfortunately having to deal with the kind of harassment that you encountered, but not seeing that moment as a moment of defeat, but seeing that moment as a moment to galvanize and embolden other people. Can you just like walk us through? There are a lot of folks on the call who have like lived experiences from a variety of systems that have created harm, and are also thinking about how to leverage that lived experience into a moment of activism and building out campaigns. Can you just walk us through why you didn't lose? It's a terrible way of framing the question,
Yeah.
but why you
Yeah.
didn't lose hope in that moment and how you were able to use it as a launching pad for change.
hmm I think SEAT lives in this very essence. Like I said, community is so important, and what's allowed me to thrive and continue this sustainably. I mean, healing myself internally first, so then I can advocate for others. And so holding that agency and that power of advocating for myself, that's what I was doing in those moments. I was also able to advocate for others, but wouldn't have been able to do that if I wasn't doing it because it was my lived experience. It was in my self-interest. It was in my, I was ready for that moment. I was coming to terms with that. I wasn't in a moment of crisis, which many students are, and that's why they're unable to find that power, that confidence in advocating. And so SEAT really, I mean, I co-founded SEAT with that lived experience because I knew that no student deserved to be alone facing an impact of a policy or be alone in advocating for what's important to us. And so it was from the get-go something that was at the core of SEAT. And as we've advocated and grown over the past 2 years, everything that we do is intentional and intentionally in students' lived experiences, grounded in our roots. We intentionally center students who are impacted by the policies that we advocate for, and then show up for each other. And so today we filed an amicus brief on the Crown Act case in Texas. So that there's a spokesperson is Datavion Daniels, who is a Black student in high school, so directly impacted by that policy. We have advocated for dress code, advocated for equity in dress codes, which the spokespeople in that, through the ACLU, were people who are of trans identity. And so that is something that's important and directly related to their lived experiences. So in different topics or different matters, different laws, we show up for each other, and we treat this as a moment of students finding that power within themselves. And so they are able to grow as individuals, they're able to develop their leadership, and they're able to create impact together as a movement. So it's not something that they just have to understand how it works from the start. No, no one's going to know how to do this from the start. But what we are is experts of our lived experiences. And so we draw power from that. And then we create those stepping stones, those stairs for others to climb along the way through peer mentoring, through brokering connections with press or with policymakers. Like that social capital, the networks that we built, the relationships, we can leverage so much power from that. And so that's what being a peer mentor network is so incredible. That's what SEAT is, and that's what makes it so powerful, because it's really built up of the people who represent this movement, and how we are just brick by brick building this up even bigger than it was a year ago or a month ago or a week ago.
Thank you for that. Let's see. Yeah, Shayna, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Sorry, my voice is cracking. Thank you so much, Cameron, for being here and talking about how recent some of your own experiences were, but how you work with students currently. My question is, sorry, about mentoring. Like you said, as a queer person too, I find that having like being able to see older queer people, like survived queer people, especially in like as they have proximity to like my experiences, like wanting to be an architect or wanting to be an artist, just means so much, because it's like a form of resistance to see this person who's alive despite so much like bureaucracy and so much sexism. So do you have, and in this network you're describing, how do you really find those people that can help be advocates or like have that lived experiences? Because I feel like those people are rare almost sometimes, like they have this certain like thick skin that they've had to develop, or they've had to be very protective of, you know, like their narrative. So how do you reach out to those people so that they can, you know, like you're saying, build connection with the current youth that you're working
Yeah.
with?
Absolutely. So intergenerational partnerships is a key part of the work that we do at SEAT, where as a peer mentor network, we're also working to elevate our narrative and our power in the traditionally adult dominated spaces of policymaking. But that can also mean organizations that are youth oriented but led by adults. That can mean grant making, which is typically not going to be distributing money to student initiatives, because that's just not very common. So there's many different parts of organizations and the policy landscape that we are working in partnership with adults, professionals who represent organizations that we partner with. Where if we're able to work with groups like the AFT or ACLU or Human Rights Campaign, then we are working hand in hand and proving to the world that we aren't just some random just some random nonsensical group, right? We are something formal. And proving that, look at all these other student groups, you need to take them legitimately too. And it's career development as well for these youth who, like I said, like don't necessarily like there's no rule book, there's no manual. It's like we shouldn't be expected to know everything, but we're growing along the way. And so this is a step up in that leadership and growth, unlike ever before. Seeing so many students grow from the seeds that we planted has been just really remarkable. Seeing just how much impact we're able to make that's unparalleled to what I would have been doing at their age. So it really is a stepping stone that only gets higher as time goes. And everything that we do often involves having to make those hard asks of there's no students that are in this committee or in this event planning or in the panel program or where like can we have a student be part of this? And so it seems maybe like we're asking too much or we're kind of budging, but if this is about education, then people need to hear from the students themselves. The students themselves need to be part of this. And so it's about making those cultural shifts within organizations that claim to be student led, but really might not be, or that are focused on youth, but aren't really having youth involved in that. So leadership and decision making is something that all students deserve and is what we are working to achieve. So then all of us have agency to make the everyday decisions about our life and our futures.
Other questions?
Hi, Cameron. This is Manuela from Communities for Just Schools Fund. Apologies for the background noise. I'm driving.
You're good.
Congratulations. Like your story is so inspiring. I was wondering, what are some of your hopes for the next 2 to 3 years for yourself in your leadership, for the leadership of the young people that you're helping activate and organize? For the partnerships that you have with adults who are litigating alongside you, the parents and caregivers who are flanking you all. Just curious, what do you hope to see in the next few years?
It's such a great question. Thank you. I definitely hope that we are able to make some significant wins and increase our efficacy of understanding that we have power in our voices and that we can make change, knowing that the next several years are going to be really rough, that this isn't over, that these issues that we're facing right now remain precarious. This is still ongoing culture war, just this very volatile political moment in our nation, or in education policy, social policy related to marginalized people. Very precarious moment. And hoping to pivot it in a positive direction, even if it means losing at times, we need to make some wins. And so that's a hope I have for SEAT, for it to continue growing and continue being part of people's lives. Like I know I don't want people to do this just for the resume, but seeing that people are putting this on their resume after having given their heart and soul into the movement, that is truly why they're part of this. But to see that this is something on their resume or see that they're asking for rec letters or whatever this is, like this is a moment in their life, like a core moment of their time. Like they've been part of this for multiple years throughout high school. Like if I look back on what I was doing in high school, sometimes it was just 1 year or like one semester, or there were certain things, but that they're heavily involved over time. Like that's something huge. Like this is, I'm just so proud of them and just can't wait to see what these students do and just how like they're already doing so much right now, but just seeing where they are going, where they're heading. And for myself, I'm in my third year as an undergraduate right now, and I'm really finding great affirmation from the courses and faculty and just peers in this space. It's an academic bubble, but it's one where I belong and one where I know that being whole in this space gives me that strength to fight in the spaces like home in Texas, where it really needs a lot of that effort and resiliency. So I'm looking at grad school right now and seeing just wherever they're going to accept me, 2 applications. So it's going to be one or the other. So I guess you have to stay tuned. And just looking forward to continuing my education path since I am a nerd. I, I love learning. I know I'll be a lifelong learner. And I'm also a visionary and someone who knows that pedagogy and practice of power relate, that there's a methodology to this, but it's ever evolving and there's lessons to be learned. And what we're doing right now is something to be looked back on. And it's something that we can author our own history. Like we're living in a moment of history right now, and we deserve to be authors of that. And so it's being in the moment, fully present in the moment, but doing it with that look to the future of the future that we envision and hope to shape.
Thank you for that. And we know that all the acceptance letters and scholarships offers are going to be flooding your inbox. We're going to speak that into the universe.
Hopefully.
Amazing. Other questions?
Hi, thank you for everything, Cameron. I have one final, more fun question for you. Of the different books and pieces of literature that you've seen people want to ban or that you're fighting against schools to have, what are a few that you think are especially helpful for youth?
Hmm. So I saw myself more in challenged books than I did in my school library when these were being pulled off of shelves. And so it kind of wasn't until those moments where I sought out that literature and those just resources and found myself in the literary canon. Because for years I loved visiting bookstores and libraries with my mom, especially, and just always I was always reading. My mom just posted a memory on Facebook from like 10 years ago or something. It was like Cameron had like 10 books in their backpack and this is the first day of school and 10 books. No, we had to narrow it down to 4. So just being like just that was something just wow. And so looking at that list of books and the list of books that I have now is drastically different. Seeing how the literary canon has evolved over time, to see that I didn't really have that queer literature when I was younger, or I didn't have these stories with such critical perspectives. And so I've really enjoyed um, recently just finding these books, to seeing that these books that are being banned are so important and have been meaningful for me. And so some of these would be like, I mean, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Speaking on a panel with him just a couple weeks ago was such an experience. Um, but then like The Collectors by A.S. King, it's an anthology, so several authors, including David Levithan, another great friend of mine. So like this whole selection of authors writing these weird stories, embracing the weird is just remarkable. The authenticity and just the limitless boundaries that we have for ourselves. So there's stories like that. Flamer is one that I really saw myself in because I also did scouting when I was younger and found it to be a really just awful space for me. And that might not have been the experience for everyone, but that was the experience for me. And that was the experience for Mike Curato, the author and illustrator of the graphic novel. And so Flamer gave me words for the trauma that I had gone through in middle school. And to have a book like that when I would have been younger would have been so incredible. But to only have that later in high school as it was already being challenged. It just was really just heartwarming to read a story like that. And so there's too many books. I could never name a very favorite because in
Well,
any
thank you.
context,
That was
my answer would
very
be so
helpful.
different. But those are
Fair.
just some to name a few.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Awesome. So I'm gonna sneak in one final question before we go, and it is, everybody on this call I know is inspired by your work. What are ways that we can support, uplift the work that you're doing, the work that Seat's doing? This is a time for any kind of shameless promotions that you want to push.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as I put in the chat before, I'll put it again. Um, studentsengage.org is our website. And so you can find a bit about us. If you take out your phones right now and follow us on Instagram, you can also find the link to our socials there. You can join our email list on the homepage of our website if you scroll down as well. If you can do that right now, that's really incredible. There's also a donation page if you are inclined to contribute financially. We do have that online too. And anytime you want to connect, you can connect with our team and present any offers, ideas, just partnerships, whatever that might be, in-kind donations of any sort, just whatever support, even just a lovely, kind message in our inbox would brighten students' days. But we are here if there's anything professionally. We can connect students with any leadership opportunities or projects or things. It's a network that's very mutual, and the reciprocity allows us to learn in the process and offer and take ownership of our leadership. So that's definitely something. I'm trying to think if there's anything big. Kind of further down the line in Texas, we'll have our advocacy day in the coming ledge session, which is tentatively in April. So we are excited to launch that soon. Looking for organizational sponsorships for that, and growing our base on the ground for welcoming students to the state capitol, many of whom it'll be their first time ever being at the state capitol, as it had been the past 2 years when we organized our advocacy days, or the first time that students are able to testify or meet with lawmakers. And so just really excited for what's to come.
Appreciate it. Cool. Everybody, let's give Cameron another round of applause. Like,
Thank
we
y'all so
really
much.
grateful for you. Again, everybody, please do what Cameron said. Go follow all the work. Go sign up for the listservs. Like, to their point, like, this work does not happen without people like actually supporting and showing up like they show up for us. So please, please, please go out and boost the work. Just a quick heads up for folks. Like I mentioned, this will be our last part of the Ending Youth Surveillance series for 2024, but do not despair. We're going to be back and ready to go in 2025. So be on the lookout for the next installment in our series. I wish everybody has a lovely and restful evening. And again, thank you so much, Cameron.